So good day, everyone. My name is Olivier Nicolay. I'm working for Skeyes for more than 30 years. My background is in ATC. I've been a traffic controller for almost 30 years now. And since 2 years, I'm the senior advisor in operational developments at Skeyes. Inside the operational developments that are of future nature, it's a UTM development, and I'm working in that since 2 years as well. Also, as working group three representative and coach and chairman inside the Belgian Civil Drone Council. Today, my presentation will also talk about the future, and this future is made of one big thing for the drones and for the UTM in general. It's use space, and we're gonna try to have a look, a forward-looking perspective in how Skeyes is envisaging to transform its airspace and reshape the airspace in function of this new use space context. First of all, we have to integrate newcomers, and by newcomers, we don't mean the traditional drones that are already active in our airspaces, but also all the services, all the people that are ready to deploy massive services with drones, with big fleets operated from command and control centers, in BVLOS operations, all this business that is ready to develop, but that doesn't benefit from the adequate infrastructure to be able to integrate itself safely and smoothly in an already populated environment in the air. It's therefore that Skeyes is of opinion that there will be an urgent need for further development of the infrastructure of the airspace and the service delivered to unmanned aviation in a very near future. And it is why we intend with this presentation to focus on the future shape of use space and the context use space will mean for a navigation service provider like us. More particularly on how we envisage as an air traffic service provider to play a role in this in function of our new obligations. So for what concerns these new obligations, we got a few steps to reconcile. When we talk about use space implementation, we must talk first of all about the initial setup, the current setup, which under the current legislative package of Europe has defined our airspace for the usage of drones as UAS geographical zones. So near and at aerodromes which are controlled by Skeyes, we have defined new airspace shapes that have specific restrictions for the accesses that is open to drone, and certain rules are to be applied by drone users. The problem with that in the future is that when we consider higher volume of drone operation and newcomers and these new customers operating vast fleets of drones, there will be a need to redefine these airspaces as use space airspaces. And when Belgium does that, it means automatically that in these airspaces, services will have to be delivered to drones. These services will not be delivered by Skeyes by nature. We will be a contributor to the efficiency of the service. And in that sense, Skeyes has to develop and has to implement new kind of information services for these specific services to drones to be delivered. Who will be the actors? The actors will be new actors as well, like USSP, service providers for the benefit of drones. Skeyes in that frame will play a role as common information service. We will have to, and as an obligation by Europe, to deliver information that is essential for these services to be developed and given and delivered by other entities like USSP. And this is about the obligation, the new obligation of Skeyes that we will speak now in this presentation. What are the new obligation of Skeyes in this concept? First of all, it is important to mention that whenever Europe envisage U-space at this stage, and from 2023 onward, as the few that can begin in 2023 can begin, U-space regulation mandates still a segregation of activities between manned and unmanned traffic. That means that we have not yet an integration of traffic that tangles automatically to the fact that we have to deliver and then manage airspace to drones to make sure that they do not mix with manned aviation traffic. This is particularly important for us because in the airspace we control and where we ensure safety for the manned aviation, that means that we will have to manage the airspace. We will have to shut it down and open it again to the use of drones. The Article 5 of the U-Space regulation that defines Common Information Service asks us, ANSPs, Skeyes, to deploy dynamic airspace reconfiguration, which is by definition the temporary limitation on the area located in controlled airspace within designated U-Space airspace where UAS operation can take place in order for ATC unit to accommodate short-term changes in manned traffic demand. We will see later on what that means, but that is a new obligation for the NSP to deploy this service. And this service will enable other actors to deliver service to drones. So the first step where we have to implement this dynamic airspace management are the CTRs, the control zone, the zone where Skeyes already delivers traffic to manned aviation to guarantee safe and swift operations. We speak then about areas that are located near to big cities, Brussels, Charleroi, Liège, Antwerp, Ostend, where obviously UTM and UAS operation will develop because we are close to urban environment. We might face there, obviously, traditional drone activity like telemetry, photography, and so on, the one that are already existing, surveillance of buildings, but also new services, urban air mobility, for instance, or medical services between hospitals. This will be the environment. This is typically already controlled by Skeyes today, where new airspace structure ensuring dynamic segregation between the unmanned and the manned traffic will have to be created. In this, these shapes will have to be dynamically reconfigured. For a use case and for the experience we have gathered, envisaging this future shape, we are participating to a European funded and sponsored project, which is called Sapphire Med concept. And Sapphire Med addresses particularly medical services ensured by drones between hospitals, but also to support operation by drones in emergency services, like bringing a doctor to an accident spot, and with a sense of urgency. We are dealing with this project, and there are a few new concepts in it that we are testing out. This is the concept that defines a bit the path for us to define our concept of operation with the dynamic airspace reconfiguration. We speak about free routing for drones. We speak about priority drones, about urban air mobility when we put a doctor in a drone. We have different areas of operation. We have pre-planned of operation, but also on-the-spot operation with emergency, with some kind of emergency response, and all that this happening in a control zone, in that sense, control zone of Antwerp. So the point about this Sapphire Med concept it gives us a sort of laboratory to test out a few concepts, and certainly the dynamic airspace reconfiguration is one we can already envisage. So what this is all about, here we've got a test case of Brussels control zone. So in Brussels Airport, we have 3 runways. which is the shape you have in front of your eyes now. It is a controlled airspace. It is a big airport, and in this philosophy, in this sense, we're gonna look first to protect manned aviation that operates near to the airport, which is in the final stage of approach, or at the early stage of a flight that departs. This controlled airspace will be defined as a U-space airspace in the lower part. We speak here about an airspace that will be defined as U-space up to 500 feet, for instance, and that protects manned aviation. Due to the proximity of the path of the manned aviation there, it is very seldom that a drone will be allowed to cross on the spot. Most of the time, drone operation in order to go from a point A to a point B will be forced to circumnavigate this airspace, and it's only in case of emergency response or state flights, police or medical flights that drones will be allowed to cross through this red airspace. So by default, this airspace might be closed for drone operations unless the situation requires to do something else. Next to that, there is the other portion of the CTR, let's say 500 feet or below, which is low and much far away from the runways, which will then be an airspace which has the opposite status, that it is always accessible to drones, like we have in our UAS geozone today with the very low level airspace, VLL2. And this VLL2, that's the yellow part, will be redefined probably as U-space airspace, and we will then probably cut it in a few parts. There will be a north, a northwestern, an eastern part, a southern part. This is what we envisage to do. And this shape will be by default accessible to drone and only shut down in case we have manned aviation conflicting in the same level band. We speak here about typically low-level helicopters, emergency helicopters. In that case, we would have less than 10 minutes to react and to shut down the airspace and the access to drones to make sure this is handled safely and there is no conflict and there is segregation between the manned aviation and the unmanned. Just to note, this dynamicity in airspace management is something new to us. Until now, the maximum we did go to the dynamicity of an airspace management, typically between military and civil, was -3 hours. So operation -3 hours, we are declaring the new status of the airspace. Here in UTM and in U-space, the new challenge for us is to dynamically change the airspace status in less than 10 minutes. Because when an helicopter deploys low level, it is automatically linked to a special activity. It is either due to some form of special mission like pipeline controls or the survey of critical equipment, or it is heavily linked to emergency operations. So the time that is given to ATC to take away this airspace from drones and give it back to manned aviation extremely challenging. Next to that, if we consider the airspace that is above 500 feet, again, it will be probably a red status for drones and only opportunity flights or flights that are certified, that are equipped suitably to be visible on our radars or to be able to communicate on a conventional way will be allowed there. It is not sure that it will always be closed for drones. There might be certain corridors open for certain type of activity that have to be supported by specific type of drones that can be equipped with transponders and so on. We have not yet a full picture on that, but again, this will be probably an airspace that is by default not acceptable to drones, but subject to authorizations by ATC under certain circumstances. Next to that, there is another part of the airport which is mostly the runway perimeter. Here you have the 3 runways in Brussels. In the Brussels case, it's 3 runways that have to be protected again from a security point of view, not only from an aviation safety point of view. And this would be also an airspace that would be not accessible to drones by default. Only certain missions would then be allowed to operate. Well, now a specific animation about how would that be applied when we have a use case. For instance, an helicopter is requesting to join Brussels airfield. You see in the middle of the shape there are the 3 runways. We have got in the north 25 right in black, in the south 25 left, and in the middle the runway is 01. It's a 3 runway system. Let's say that this helicopter requests joining clearance to the field and requests a specific route to fly to the airfield. What we're gonna do is that we're gonna shut down the airspace where the helicopter would be flying, and we would have to do that 10 minutes with 10 minutes pre-notification, and the airspace is rearranged to permit that passage, and afterwards it will be open again to drones. For the management of the airspace, we are the airspace management, so Skeyes manages the airspace, gives away the information to the outside world, and after, it's the USSP business to translate this message in an operational instruction to the drone, or to tell him, caution, there is traffic, go on the ground, or avoid the airspace with a geo-awareness feature. This is how we envisage the thing to be organized. The same goes for the other direction. There may be critical areas that are defined as shapes that can be activated or deactivated, and in order to segregate the 2 activities, that's the way we'll go. Now, what we have been testing in Sapphire Med concept is also the ability or the possibility to activate and deactivate corridors. Here, in this use case, the ATC unit would have to manage an emergency via a reconfiguration of the airspace. What we envisage to do, and what we're going to test in the Sapphire Med concept, is to implement a corridor where ATC then knows perfectly then at a certain stage where this corridor would be between a point A and a point B, and then the manned traffic has to be reorganized around that corridor because it's an emergency. And we face then new services handled by drones in an emergency response as a service to the population and to a certain stage. This activity has a higher priority than a manned aircraft operating in the same area. And this is a new concept too, that we're trying to test case in the Sapphire Med. Is there a possibility at one stage to inverse the priority, which is obviously always that manned aviation has priority on drones, except if drones are carrying out operations, being firefighting here in this example, or carrying a blood sample to an accident spot, or even a doctor to save lives, and then ATC has to inverse the priority and reorganize its traffic around that situation. This is something we're going to try out in Sapphire Med with a specific scenario, which something that will be organized. The ultimate goal, of course, is to readdress that in a live environment in an unplanned way, of course, because emergencies are not planned. And so this is the real challenge for ATC, to support all type of services and all type of drone activities we might have in the future in our airspace. What we are expecting more and more is that state services and emergency services will be maybe the first comers in this area of activity with drones. being police, being hospitals, being firefighting. And so these will be probably the ones we have to accommodate with these kinds of priorities, because by nature, state services and state flights have some form of priority vis-a-vis any other operation. So that was it. That was how we envisage our contribution to use space. Again, this concerns the new obligation for Skeyes to reorganize the way we manage airspace and how we make airspace available to drones in the future. We already do that today in the current setup of the UAS geographical zone, but it's much less dynamic than what we have shown now. We must imagine that when we implement this dynamicity in the airspace, the volume of drone operations that can be supported is much higher than today. And most of all, it will be also something that makes BVLOS flights possible with fleet management and service deployment. So that's the new era for us. That's the new given for ATC. And by doing that, we are probably on our way to more integration. And we hope that these kind of initiatives and the way that we can be in certain ways successful with these concepts can help the sector lifting off and can help the sector to develop new services. So thank you for your attention and see you next time.